Hey folks, it's mobile edition of Airtime Paintball. So I am randomly making this video right now because I just had a phone call from a friend of mine. He doesn't live. We used to play paintball together, but we don't live in the same area anymore. And in a shocking turn of events, he called me to ask about buying, and it doesn't matter which one, about he wanted a new barrel system for a marker, just because the one that he had didn't look cool on his new one, and he's asking me which one is better. And the thing that was shocking is I can't believe that a friend of mine is still wondering that. And I kind of was thinking about it, and I'm thinking about how this myth continues to persist. And I know I had so many months ago, I've collected a ton of data to demonstrate what I'm about to say, and life has gotten crazy. You guys who watch my videos know I haven't put out much lately, and that's on me. I've just had so much going on, I haven't had time. I've got all this barrel data. I did a live video a while back, live stream, where I went through the data and showed folks about why and all the reasons why, and the supporting data that barrels really don't matter virtually at all. And so my friend called me, we hung up, and I just fired up my phone to make this while I'm on my way to play paintball with my guys. Here's the thing. A barrel, as long as it's straight and it has a reasonably good finish inside so that it's not imparting undue friction on the ball, and to a small extent you have some type of way to at least roughly match the bore to the paint, and even that is not all that important. Your barrel does everything that a barrel can do. The porting can serve to make it sound different, and if you have a ton of porting, it can reduce the efficiency some, because some of the air that propels the ball out will be vented to atmosphere instead, right? But apart from that, there's no difference in accuracy, etc. And here is why. I'm gonna describe this, and forgive me if I'm rambling because I'm driving, but there are claims by a few barrel makers. You'll notice, by the way, that most barrel companies are companies who make barrels and other things. When they do their marketing for barrels, they'll stay away from saying this one is better than that one. They'll say things that are a little tricky, like no barrel is more accurate than this one. Yeah, well, that's true because they're all the same, right? But there are some that make claims, and this is why that doesn't work. A paintball is roughly spherical, but it's not perfectly round, and importantly, it has a seam, right? So in order for a barrel to have a dynamic relationship with a ball that would, in theory, make the ball travel in some kind of a different way, or a more accurate way, or a longer range way, or whatever, the only way to do that would be to impart spin on the ball, right? Because if you don't interact with the ball in some kind of dynamic way, think rifling in a rifle barrel, like a real firearm, that makes the projectile spin and change and imparts an increase in accuracy. But the reason for that is a rifle round is not a sphere. It's pointy and long. So when you spin it on its longitudinal axis, that gives it aerodynamic advantage, and it travels straighter. Well, paintball isn't like that. It's round, but more importantly, it isn't perfectly round, and it has a seam. We can't control the orientation of the seam when the ball drops in the breech, right? So every time you get a new paintball in the breech, that seam is oriented differently in there. So if the barrel, even if it could or did, I'm gonna turn my radar detector off here, impart a spin on the ball, you would get unpredictable results, which would be harmful to accuracy. Because when the seam is this way, the ball would go like this, and when the seam is that way, the ball would go like that, and you'd be shooting all over the place. You wouldn't be able to hit anything, right? And if you know anything about baseball, that's why you hear 2-seamer fastball or 4-seamer fastball, or how a pitcher grips the ball differently to throw a curve or a slider. All of that is because the seams protrude from the ball, giving it a different dynamic relationship to air, and the way the pitcher throws it, making it move differently, right? When the pitcher can hold the ball across 2 seams or 4 seams and throw the exact same pitch with everything else being the same, and just the orientation of the ball makes it move differently. Now, they're doing it on purpose, but we don't get to do it on purpose because we can't control that orientation. That is why the barrels necessarily don't have any dynamic relationship to the ball. They don't impart a spin. They don't do anything to the ball. They're just there to guide the ball in the right direction out the barrel. So, the differences you get are as follows. Depending on how tightly you match the bore, this has been tested. I'm having trouble thinking off the top of my head the name of the videos. I'll put it in the description. But years ago, some guys did some really good testing where they repeated, underbore, match bore, overbore, etc., and they graphed the accuracy of the shots. They did pretty big sample sizes, pretty good stuff, and they did find something really interesting that isn't really intuitive, and I wouldn't have predicted it, but they did a good job demonstrating. Is that so? Because you're not imparting any sort of action on the ball, you would think that velocity consistency would be the absolute arbiter of accuracy, right? If you could shoot, I've said this before, and mostly it's true, but hear me out. If you could shoot a marker and it went 290, 290, 290, 290, 290, 290, 290 every time you shot, you would be holding the most accurate marker that exists, because that's all that matters is velocity consistency. But they actually put a twist on this when they did the testing. What they found out is the best bore match for velocity consistency, by a small margin, but it was measurable and repeatable, was a slight underbore. An underbore means you're kind of stuffing the ball into a bore that's slightly smaller than the ball. And that does go to reason if you think about it, right? Because if it's a slight underbore, you're guaranteeing a seal all the way around the bore so that you're getting a very consistent force behind the ball to push out, right? If you have a little bit of an overboard, the ball there's like space, then that space won't be consistent, and sometimes a little bit more air will escape around the ball, and that would make the ball travel slightly slower, so you get less velocity consistency. So the most consistent velocity was the slight underbore. But they discovered something interesting, is that if they did a slight overbore, they lost a little bit. I'm talking about a slight overbore, the kind where you put the ball in the bore and it doesn't really roll out, but you can blow it out pretty easily, like it sort of sticks in there, but it's not stuffed in. That did result in a slight decrease in velocity consistency, but it actually resulted in a slight increase in accuracy. And they surmised, and I agree, it's really the only thing that makes any sense, is the reason for that is that stuffing the ball into the breech like that in an underbore situation is necessarily like squishing the ball, right? So now you're getting friction against the barrel, and depending on the orientation of the seam or the roundness of the ball, that friction can impart slightly different action on the ball. And not only that, but when it exits the tight part of the barrel, it's going to have some sort of a rebound to its natural shape, and depending on the orientation of the seam or how round it is, that can also affect the path. And for those reasons, it seems like there was a little bit less accuracy. It wasn't a big deal. It was a very small amount. That all worked fine. But the point among all that testing was that even bore matching really didn't make much difference. One thing you can get is a little bit more efficiency, because what we said, right? If there's no gap around the ball, then essentially all of the air, or most of it, is propelling the ball. So if you're playing stock class or those micro tanks, you might want to underbore in order to get maximum efficiency. If the thing that's most important to you is accuracy, you want to go with a slight overbore. But notice that we're only talking about the bore. We're not talking about which barrel you're using, because they're all just tubes. Like one tube that measures 684 across the bore is the same as the next tube that measures 684 across the bore. There's just no difference, because there can't be a difference. It's just a metal tube, right? There are a couple of barrel systems that will be slightly different when it comes to efficiency, and that it would be a stepped bore system, like the Inception Stella, the parabolic barrels. There's a core tip system for the FL barrels, and what these are look at what's an example. The core one, that's different FL tips, but the tips themselves are actually have a bore size. Like, it's not just big. They have, like, I don't remember what the numbers are, but they have like a small, medium, and large. And the idea is that when you bore match your paint, however it is you want to do, let's say you end up with a 680 back. What you do is you take the smallest tip you have that's bigger than that and use that tip. And when you do that, that slightly graduated tip size versus just having a control bore and then a huge barrel, which is what most are, you do get a bit additional efficiency from doing that. And that was borne out in the testing that I did in that data I was talking about. And that's true for parabolic barrels. The Inception Stella has a stepped bore system. The parabolic does it. Those are one-piece barrels. And what they do is they have a set of 4. And the way they go is that, like, they're marked, like, for example, one of them is a 680, 685. And what that means is the control bore is 680, and then the rest of it is 685. It's just a small step up for the rest of the barrel. Whereas if you had, say, I don't know, like a Dye ULS barrel, you put a 680 back on it, but you're still using the same tip, and that tip is really big. It's, I don't know how big they are. I've never measured one, but like well over 690, maybe even 0.7, right? And the idea is that no matter how big a paint you use, the tip is always big enough for it to get through. You don't run into an issue with the tip being too small ever. And that all works fine. Dye barrels are my favorite barrels because they look cool and they're quiet. But you do get a small amount of efficiency boost when you use one of these stepped bore tip systems. Is it enough to matter? Hard to say. Sorry, I'm waiting for traffic. It depends what your definition of matter is. It's kind of like when people say, "Hey, is this such a piece of gear worth it?" Well, what does worth it mean? I mean, if you really like it and it's cool and you want one, then it's worth it. I mean, it depends what your definition is. If you're saying, if I buy this piece of gear, will I win more speedball points? Then almost always the answer is going to be no, it's not worth it, because that's not what buying gear is, not what wins points, right? So with the tip system, is it worth it? If efficiency is your number one goal, or I mean, it doesn't have to be your number one goal, but if you're willing to spend in order to get an incremental increase in efficiency, then it's worth it to you, right? If what your goal is accuracy, then you're not gaining anything by having a stepped bore system if you don't care about the efficiency part. So in your case, it would not be worth it. But like I said, you do get a small difference in efficiency. So the upshot here is that when you're shopping for a barrel system, I would recommend that you buy a barrel system or a set of barrels, or however you're going to go about it, that has some sort of, at least a rough way to match the bore. You don't have to get crazy with it. Generally speaking, I mean, I have a full freak sets because I've mentioned this in other videos. My favorite bargain way to go is all my different barrels, I have one barrel and then I have it bored to accept the standard freak inserts. That way, when I get a new marker or new barrels, I don't have to buy a complete set of backs, right? Like the dye barrels come to mind because I mentioned that I love dye barrels. Yeah, well, the backs are like $50 each. So if you buy a new colored marker and you want to match it, that's $200 more in backs you have to buy so your new marker matches your barrel, right? Well, I don't have to do that. I just have one, bore it for freaks, and I use the same old freaks that I've been using for years in that barrel. So as I buy more barrels, it's like a savings, right? That savings accumulates as I don't have to keep buying whole kits. So if you're buying a barrel, you want to have some kind of way to match the bore. And this is why I'm sorry, I got off track. With my freak, I have whole sets, right, of all the inserts. I only ever use like a couple of them, right? If I have really small paint, I put a 679 in there, and if the paint is bigger than that, then I put a 684 in there. And though in a couple years now, I don't believe I've used a different insert except 679 and 684. If all you want is functionality and you're not going to get all persnickety and try to match your bore exactly for a reason that I don't understand, because you don't get any actual gain out of this like like super exacto trying to match, right? You just want one that fits small paint, a medium one, and then maybe a big one just in case, right? Like, I would say 99% of paintball today, at least in America, can be properly covered by a 689, a 684, and a 679. And that's really all you need. But so yeah, some kind of a way, you want some kind of a way to at least a little bit match your bore. Now, if you're using a closed bowl like an autococker or a pump, you need to get better than that, because if you have an overbore, the ball will roll out of the barrel when the ball comes forward. You don't want that. So that's a case where you want to slide underbore to keep the ball in the breech. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about regular paintball that most of us are playing. So you want, some kind of a way, a little bit of bore matching, and you want some. You want porting to keep it quiet if that's your thing. I guess what I should say is you want it to sound the way you like. So if you like a louder shot, then you're going to want to find something with smaller porting or less porting. And if you get quiet, you want larger porting or more porting. And all of that right there, besides that, it's all looks. So just find one that you like, and it will work fine, I promise you. Because there's no way that it can't, and there's no way for anything else to be better, no matter what somebody trying to make money selling barrels will tell you, and no matter what people who believe the old mythology tell you. You're not going to gain anything. Yeah, they work fine. I make an example. I've showed it on my channel. I've got a pretty fancy anode 170R, and a lot of people will say the stock barrel that comes with the 170R isn't a very good barrel. I've got mine, the stock barrel anode to match, and it's bored for freaks, and that thing shoots lasers just like everything else shoots lasers. Works great. So I'm arriving at Nashville Paintball. Thanks for listening to my rant about barrels. I just smashed my water bottle on the floor. Keep an eye out. Got the DSR review coming, some other stuff coming, and I appreciate you guys. Thanks very much.